Welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. We are powered by The Source Weekly, Bend's locally owned newspaper. This podcast is our eddy in the rushing waters of local journalism. We are glad that you're taking some of your time to listen to us chat with the people who shape our local community.
Thank you to our presenting sponsor, RE/MAX Key Properties, a family-owned full-service real estate brokerage specializing in residential, luxury, commercial, new construction, and ranch and land properties. Their new state-of-the-art facility at 42 Greenwood Avenue is a modern, collaborative space and the new home of the Bend Don't Break podcast recording studio.
I'm Aaron Switzer, publisher of The Source and host for the Bend Don't Break podcast. With me today is Bill Lynch. Bill is the board president of COTA and has been a COTA board member since 2021. He's been riding the trails here since 2009 and has been a full-time Bend resident since 2020. Bill's been on the boards of other nonprofits before and has a long professional career in software startups. Originally from Iowa, Bill still loves seeing the mountains every morning.
Never gets old.
And getting out in them.
Oh, absolutely.
And you still
when you
ride?
grow up when you grow up in your highest elevation's a couple hundred feet,
yeah,
the mountains never get old.
I gotta believe that you are forced to continue to mountain bike as on the board of COTA. Do you ever get the opportunity to say, I'm done with it?
It's not part of the obligation you sign right. or whatever. It's not part of our bylaws, but it's, nonprofits are all about a passion. Right. And so it'd be pretty hard to be on the COTA board without having a passion for mountain biking.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, let's start with the basic question of how does an Iowa boy like yourself get to Bend, Oregon?
Well, that's part of the software background. So I'm a computer science major. That's my education in college. Yeah. And so my best friend and I started a software company basically kind of during college, but then it really kind of incorporated after college. And I like to tell people in Oregon that we lived in the Eugene of Iowa. So Iowa City, which is now part of the Big Ten, Oregon's part of the Big Ten. Yeah. So I'm excited that the Hawkeyes will come kick the crap out of the Ducks sometime. That's not going on the podcast, is it?
Oh, that's going
okay,
big
great.
Time. It'll be the poll quote we use.
Yeah. Right. But so I grew up in a college town and that's where I went to school. And so we started a software company right out of college, which took us to New York for a few years. And then as that company got bigger, we were looking for places to grow and scale the company, and we were self-funded. And so going to the Bay Area didn't really make financial sense. And so long story short, ended up in Portland. That's where we moved the company to. And then that was 2004. So I've been in Oregon since 2004. Okay. And then we started coming to Bend right around 2008, 9 or so. I had a friend who bought a house here and said, you got to come check this out. It's an awesome place to hang out. And that's when I started biking and skiing. And so when I was on the trails, I was, the first question was like, wow, who made these amazing trails? And my friend didn't just tell me COTA, he sent me the link to COTA's donation page as if to say, hey, give him some money, help him out and become a member. So that's what started the membership. And then when I moved here in 2020, like any place you move to, you want to get involved and meet people locally, and the COTA board. At that time, our executive director, who was our first ever full-time hire, she started officially in January of 21.
Okay. And
it was right around that time that the board was doing a strategic plan refresh that I got involved with and kind of helped out because I've done that before. Yeah. So I got to know some of the board members and they convinced me to run for the board. So it was that summer of 21 that I joined the board.
Wow, great. Yeah. Great. Well, the COTA's role in developing all these trails, prior to any kind of trend in mountain biking, kind of put Bend on, a lot of people attribute Bend, there's the beer and the biking, right? At the two, value foundations for Central Oregon tourism. But I've lived here long enough to remember when the trails were just something people did around here. It wasn't something that we broadcast to the world about how great they were. And it seems like there's a lot of people who have the story of like, you come over and it's not just that the trails were good. They were well maintained. Yeah. There were a lot of them, a lot of diversity. And those guys who originally created them couldn't possibly have maintained the network that exists today. But in a way, that's the root of a lot of the growth and why everybody beelines here, right?
Yeah, I think I have to guess that in general, if you look at the trend of overall popularity in mountain biking as a sport,
Yeah.
it tracks with the popularity of Bend as a destination and the growth of our trail network and the population increase. So, we would love to think that it's COTA's. You can thank COTA for all of the wonderful, new residents we have here and whatnot. But I think it's just, it's very symbiotic. All those things have grown together. And, I think you've sort of mentioned something that people reflect to us a lot. And I don't know if you travel around the States or the world and go mountain biking. I do.
I do.
And, I noticed the difference in our trails versus others. Now, obviously there's difference in dirt and climate and that whatnot. And you can't do anything about that, but trail signage and sort of the completeness of the opportunities to mountain bike, and Bend is sort of known for a lot of great cross country, a lot of distance, a lot of variety too. We have some really technical rocky parts too. So usually when people are here, they're like, "Oh man, your trail signage is so good. I always know where I'm going. The maps are awesome. The variety is great." And we just sort of take it for granted. And then you go someplace else that, also has good trails, but doesn't have the sort of finish, I like to think of it, and the kind of completeness of it. So, I think that is due in large part to at this point, almost 33 years of a really active trails organization that takes care of that stuff, but also a culture that values it too.
Well, I think you do take it for granted here. It's extensive. It's well signed. If you're taking people out, and they, people come to town, they're like, they want to go mountain biking. You can take them on a variety of things within their level, where you get over your head all the time when you're going and traveling and mountain biking. I don't necessarily get lost. I think there's enough apps but signage certainly helps when you go shooting by and you're like spending 10 minutes looking at Strava trying to figure out how to get back. So a lot of that has to do with I think COTA's input there.
Yeah.
You guys are, I'd like to just try to give readers an understanding. I mean, COTA has a unique relationship with the Forest Service and has done a good job fostering that relationship, building that trust. But how does it fall to COTA to be out there in the forest working on these trails, managing them?
So it's kind of the origin story of the organization. So we were founded as a nonprofit, which meant somebody filled out the paperwork to get the 501c3 status in 1992. And my understanding was that was done primarily because the Forest Service, we were working informally with the Forest Service for years, building trails, maintaining trails. And at one point, I think both parties said, let's kind of up-level this and make it official. And so the relationship is, formally, they're the landowner, we're the steward of the trails, we're the designated steward of the trails. So which means that any building of new trails or any maintaining of the trails goes to COTA. And there's no real need for a competing organization, but they're the ones that we're designated for those trails. And there's a couple exceptions to that for a couple trails that are maintained by other individuals, but that's really very, very much the exception to the rule.
Sure.
I think alone in the Deschutes National Forest, I think it's about half of our total trails, so about over 300 miles of trails. Wow. So we maintain 600 miles total across all of Central Oregon, 300 miles of which are in the Deschutes National Forest.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, it's fascinating that it's not just working now with one forest. You guys are expanding. You're growing into other areas. How does that happen? What does that look like? It's board creep, right? You started with 5, now you got 12 board members.
Well, I mean, so if you look, the way our board works is that we have at-large members. So kind of works how you think it does. You get nominated, you're voted in by the members, and then you have chapter reps. So there's 6 chapters in COTA.
Okay.
Bend, Sun River, Madras, Prineville, which Crook County, Sisters, and Redmond.
Amazing.
Got them all 6.
Yeah.
So 6 chapters have 6 board reps. So that's 6 of the board members.
Oh, okay.
And to become a chapter, those all started as like, a handful of people maintaining trails and then pitching a case to the board and saying, hey, we in Sisters would love to come and join us. Now, Sisters is actually a unique one because the Sisters Trail Alliance maintains about half the trails there. And then we primarily, we do some other trails, like one of the bike parks is up there. Okay. But like Madras is a good example. They're a fairly small chapter, but they joined several years ago and, kind of pitched a case and said, we'd like to come into the umbrella. So that's kind of how it's grown over years, very organically. We haven't looked at something and said, let's go tackle Crook County or wherever else.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering. Do you and the board go, the Ochicos.
Yeah.
We need an at-large member. Let's go that direction, or does it happen in reverse?
Happens really organically. I think, we're at 600 miles now. I think that, what's the next 30 years of COTA look like? Is it 1,000 miles? Maybe.
Sure.
If that were to happen, how would that happen? You could say, well, there's trails, outside of where we work now. There's more stuff around La Pine. There's stuff around Waldo Lake. There's, more stuff. There's all these pockets where you could see trails filling in. And I think it's a matter of having passionate local people that want to see the trails there. Obviously members, people who want to become members, people who want to become donors, that all helps. So we'll see. We basically look at it as we have our plate full with maintaining 600 miles. The goal is to try to touch every mile of trail every year, keep the things well maintained. And so if we did no other trails, that's plenty, right?
Right.
But I think, there's always opportunity to grow. And I think you look back in the 90s, would they have envisioned that we have 600 miles of single track available today? Probably not,
Right.
So we'll see where it goes. But I think there's a lot that we can still do. Right? So.
I mean, mountain biking doesn't show any signs of slowing down as an industry or a trend. And I can imagine, just in the time that I've lived here, just looking at areas outside of Central Oregon that before they're just hiking trails. I was just down Lake of the Woods, down by Klamath Falls, and they've got it all marked now, whether you can ride your bike or not. And I thought, well, that's because there's riders down here, and tons of people down there.
Totally. You see that all the time. You see, I follow Single Tracks is a great website, and I feel like every fifth article on that is some region planning a bunch of new miles of trails, right? Just constant.
Yeah. How do you guys compare to other organizations within the state? Are you size-wise? Are there large organizations?
That's a good question. It's been a while since I've checked. I would guess we're probably the largest organization. There's other ones, there's a Hood River. I think they're called HRATs, if I remember. And there's a couple around the Portland area. The one that I kind of think about a lot often is Evergreen in Washington. They're much bigger. They're state funded, as well as donor funded. And basically their chapters are about the size of a COTA. So, they have my company, I have a co-founder who lives on Bainbridge. And so I forget exactly the chapter section of Washington up there, but Port Gamble State Park and like those areas up there is where I ride when I visit that area. And that's, any given chapter of theirs is about the size of COTA.
Okay.
So we kind of think about their organization.
It's a good model.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's a good model, state funding along with?
It's interesting. I think that they have the breadth to touch trails across the state. So I think it's, if you want to put some state dollars to work, they're a great organization to do that.
Okay.
If you look at Central Oregon Trail Alliance, COTA, so we would be just in Central Oregon. So what does that mean? Is that Deschutes and Crook County and maybe a couple others?
Yeah.
Is that the state? We haven't really gone through the process of doing that, and looking at that as a revenue stream. If anybody from the state's listening would love to talk to me about that, I'm game. But we haven't really crossed that bridge yet, and we'll see.
When you think about the trend right now as mountain bikes are becoming more popular and great for you, I'm sure there's more people coming in, COTA's donorship rolls grow. But what does it mean for usage on the trails, like Phil's system, which, has become, packed. I could use a lot of other adjectives, but we'll just settle with
busy.
It's busy.
But even though I personally find when the parking lot's full, it's not like you're just passing people all the time.
Right.
You'll see people on the trail, but it's always surprising to me how you get out there and it's like, oh, there's room to breathe. Like, I can still have a day and not see too many people. But to your point, it's growing quite a bit. Yeah.
Growing. And what, for you in terms of maintenance, that's got to be, as you're forecasting up, well, that's going to be quite a bit more maintenance as more and more people are. You're becoming a mini Mount Bachelor, around that area. Is that daunting at all? Or what do you look, when you look at what's going to happen there, what's the thoughts from a board perspective?
Well, there's several different ways to look at it. None of this stuff is free, although volunteers are the lifeblood of our organization and they do by far and away most of the work. But, I think not a lot of people sometimes realize this COTA is a nonprofit and we live by membership donations or other large donors or other business involvement. And so those dollars go to pay for like shovels and rental equipment, and we have a bunker that we rent and keep equipment there, and we pay staff who then coordinates the work and makes sure that we're spending our time with volunteers efficiently and whatnot. And so, yeah, there's part of it is like, the demand of the usage of the trail has put demands on COTA to scale as an organization to meet those needs, because we talk about this a lot. You absolutely could phone it in out there, right? You could definitely like do a quarter of the maintenance you normally do, and you would absolutely see that in the quality of the trails. Our standards are much higher. We really desire to see excellence out there, and I think people appreciate that and value it. So, but yeah, I mean, the numbers of riders have grown quite a bit. I did the math on this, and I wish I had the number in front of me, but basically I looked at the population increase just in Deschutes County since 2000, so roughly the last 20 years, and it's massive. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but I think it's doubled, right? Let's call it it's doubled. And then you look at the percentage of the population that the bike industry says ride mountain bikes, and you maybe fudge a little bit because probably more people do here than your average county. And then just the math on that is thousands more riders per year. We have 1.5 million people ride on those 600 miles of single track somewhere per year, roughly. So yeah, it's going up. I mean, and then, our climate is such that the trails get really dusty and dry and they erode and wear differently than you would in like Bellingham or like Arkansas or whatever. So, I mean, basically we, and then I could talk a little bit about the Forest Service. They don't let us go and drop a bunch of concrete structures in the middle of the forest. So our hands
can't pave the trail.
We can't pave the trails, can't reinforce things really. So our hands are a little tied about what we can do out there. So, all those things put different pressure on the organization. I think in general, though, that it's good. I mean, I think that's a good pressure because, you want the community to be involved. I think the spirit of the riders and sort of the vibe of the ridership out there is excellent. I personally find a lot of really great people on the trails I see all the time. Hey, how's it going? All that kind of stuff. So I think it's evolved to be a really good culture, a really supportive culture. So, but yeah, I mean, definitely population. And I'm sure we'll talk about e-bikes in a minute, but like there's some concern about like the rule changes that look like they're coming next year for e-bikes, resulting in a crush of new riders. And we don't think it's going to happen. We don't think it's going to exceed the wave of riders we've already seen over the last 20 years. So.
Yeah, that was going to be my next lead in on that is there are new rules and regulations coming on e-bikes. What's COTA's thoughts around that new usage?
Yeah. So to back up a second, so it's funny. You go to the trails and you see these trail markers, and they say Ben's Trail. So the name of the trail. They say the green, black, or blue. Right. It says Deschutes National Forest. Then it says COTA, and then it says no e-bikes. And so the reason is because those are the Forest Service's rules. They've looked at anything with a motor or a battery as a motorized vehicle, and these trails have been designated as non-motorized vehicles historically. Yet COTA's name's on it, and so we get a lot of the inbound inquiries like, "Hey, what's up with that?"
Well, it's your fault.
It's our fault, right? So our first response is to explain it's not our rule to make; it's the Forest Service, and so we just direct people to the Forest Service. So I think the Forest Service has been hearing about that for many, many years now, and we caught wind of it last year that they were looking at doing something more seriously on this topic. And so their process for this whole thing is. It's long and involved. They don't do things quickly, but they try to make them last, these decisions. and the short version of it is they do a bunch of analysis. So if they want to change rules, change traffic patterns, change usage, add trails, there's the design of it. There's environmental impacts that are done. There's wildlife impacts, water impacts, soil impacts, you name it. Tons of experts weigh in. And so the recent announcement earlier last month in July was the culmination of all this work they've done. And it was a proposal to allow class 1 e-bikes on the trails. And we can talk about classes if you have questions on that and stuff. But they looked at the kinds of bikes and the kinds of impact and said, in general, we think this can work. And here's where they're going to be allowed. And then once that's published, the public has 30 days to chime in. And so I think, they probably got 1,000 different comments, if I had to guess, from people pro and con. And so they have to digest all that stuff. And then think about it some more and do some more analysis. And so it's looking like later this fall or into winter, they'll publish a final version of it. Then there's another 60-day waiting period for objections. and then there's an implementation period starting probably in the spring. If it all goes through.
Yeah.
So
But the vibe is
what's COTA's role in all this?
The
or
sense
whatever?
is though that they're going to allow them. I mean, nobody
who
knows, and
yeah.
I'm sure I don't know if you
Yeah.
can say something, but if I were looking in a crystal ball, I'd say that from what I can tell from the feedback and the letters we get at the source and our own editorial board, the mentality has shifted.
It has.
So that it is more favorable towards allowing e-bikes there.
The mentality has changed a ton. I mean, I think anything can happen with the Forest Service process, and in general, yeah, we've seen a big shift in attitude. I mean, you asked about COTA's role in the whole thing. So our role is to, first and foremost, we think, to educate our members about what the impact would be, or what's the class system, what are these different types of bikes? I mean, are they the bikes the kids are riding to high school, or are these bikes that look like mountain bikes that they know and love? So we've done a ton of homework on this issue, because our attitude was always like, look, the rules could change tomorrow. And if so, as a trail organization, we're going to be put into a position to either support or not support these bikes.
Right.
And so that has been our attitude for a long time. And so we've done a ton of
Did you
homework.
have a position prior to the Forest Service coming out with this proposed ruling?
No, not really.
Okay.
And the nuance is this.
Other than your name being really close to no e-bikes.
Right.
on
So
the
exactly. So most people would assume that COTA was very anti-e-bike, which
Right.
I think, maybe 6-7 years ago, this issue always kind of comes up every couple of years.
Right.
There's some forcing function in which, you'll see this. I'm sure you guys get letters to the editor
Sure.
too, like, why not have e-bikes on the trails? And that usually kicks off a big conversation, and then COTA gets a bunch of inbound email, and we debate it internally, or ask questions,
Yeah.
or answer questions from our members. So basically, for many years, our answer was like, I don't think that's going to work. But this is several years ago,
Yeah,
and I think things have evolved a ton since then. The bikes have changed and evolved, but also we're not the first area to consider doing this. There's Forest Service trail organizations working with Forest Service managers in Pennsylvania, Arkansas, California, Tahoe area,
Okay.
that have done analysis of Class 1 e-bikes on the trails, for the last few years, and have
Okay.
seen the impacts have been minimal.
Yeah.
And that for the most part it works. And so that was a big shift in our thinking to see, okay, this is starting to happen in different areas. And, once we as a board leaned into doing the research and understanding the class system, and actually we did some riding on these bikes ourselves to see what they felt like, what we concluded was that these bikes aren't going to, uniquely damage the trails, or, uniquely cause bad etiquette problems, or whatever else. We felt like these bikes were similar into other mountain bikes, that they would work. So there's sort of this okay, from a trail builder's point of view, are they going to work? Are they going to damage the trails? Are they going to cause accidents? And we decided that Class 1, that's an important nuance, Class 1 bikes would be okay. So that was,
maybe lean into that. What are the differences? Because I've ridden e-bikes, and
Yeah.
I've ridden the ones where they're small motorcycles.
right.
you
So
know.
there's 3 classes, and the manufacturers kind of need to pick when they make it, because so there's different power outputs and different capabilities. But generally it's this: Class 1 bikes are the lowest power and pedal assist, which means the motor only engages when you pedal. Class 2 has roughly the same power output, but has a throttle, so you don't need to pedal in order to use it to be propelled by the motor.
Right.
And then Class 3 is a little bit of both of those things, but it's mostly pedal assist, but it's a lot higher power.
Right.
And so
The one the kids love so much.
I think it's hard to tell between 2 and 3. I see a
Right.
lot of throttle bikes out there going to school, but
Right.
I mean, it's really easy to get mixed up in the kind of power numbers and stuff. But I think the simple way to think about it is what those things enable, right? Because you see cargo bikes with kids in them, or groceries, or you see kids going to school and stuff. And I think that the intent of these classes, kind of lend themselves to different use cases. So for us, one of the big shifts in our thinking was Class 1 is about assisting humans in the envelope of normal human performance. So we have a board member who's a pro racer, and she's not subtle about it. She's very fast. And so I think about her as the top end of human speed.
Yeah.
And an e-bike, a Class 1 pedal assist e-bike, is not designed to go faster than that, right? So that's why its power is limited, and that's why you have to be pedaling. And so once we kind of realized that, we thought, okay, that's a good thing to kind of keep in mind. You're not turning somebody who's human into something that's non-human, a non-human machine. And class 2 and 3 have different takes on that. Class 3 being the most different, but
Right.
I think those they have more power because they're moving heavier loads or they're going farther distances and whatnot. So
I actually went on a on a mountain bike ride with another couple. My wife and I, regular mountain bikes. They were on pedal assist, and I thought we were going to get destroyed. And they had a hard time navigating some of it. I mean, they're not, when you are doing a throttle or you're doing something like that, you're jacking forward, and in those kind of places, I was surprised how much skill it requires to navigate one of those things in an area where we really weren't having problems because our bikes are lighter. They were faster on downhills. Felt more. They weren't as heavy.
I mean, at the end of the day, like I've gone on rides with complete novices, and they were on non-e-bikes, just regular bikes.
Right.
And one of them fell, one of them, had to walk up a hill, and that's just skill. That's just like you're not used to the terrain. You're maybe not used to how big the tires are and that kind of stuff. So none of that changes, regardless of the bike you're on. But yeah, COTA feels very strongly that class 2 and 3 are not appropriate for the trails. Yeah. Too much power, not enough control,
Kicking
wrong design.
Out. Right.
Like the smaller wheeled bikes you see kids riding to school, like that's great for that use case, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a miserable day out on a mountain bike trail with roots and rocks and stuff.
Right.
So, these class 1 pedal assist mountain bikes look pretty much exactly like a mountain bike. Suspension, big tires, capable, drivetrain and whatnot, but then they have an assist. And I mean, the other thing too, these are heavier bikes, and this, right? It's like they're 50 pounds in some case. And so the motor really is designed to deal with that extra weight and kind of bring you back up to the level of a normal performance. But when I personally rode one, like they're not my cup of tea, like I don't really need one. But when I rode one, the thing that struck me was, I can dial down my effort. So I can like be riding with friends, increase the assistance and go up the hill and like kind of recover or keep up with my faster friends. But I'm not using it to go super fast. I'm using it to moderate my effort.
Right.
And that was a big turning point for COTA when we started talking to members of our community. We met a lot of people who are older, have things you can't see. So heart conditions, knee conditions, maybe they're cancer survivors and been through rounds of chemo. Like they just don't have the capacity to be out there like they used to be. And so they need assistance. And I think, you kind of look at like the mountain bike websites, and they're always like these dude bros throwing themselves down the mountains and shredding the gnar, and like that's not really who we've seen on these bikes. Like it's mostly like very nice people who want to follow the rules and enjoy their forest.
Right.
And so I think once we kind of looked at it as like these are things that we feel are compatible with our trails, but also enable people who would not be able to otherwise get out there, take part in a sport that we love and experience the trails too.
What I'm surprised is that the data is not showing that by allowing these bikes, you aren't opening those trails up for a ton more people. I mean, it just seems like you've got a whole new demographic of folks coming out there. I mean, I would think trail use would skyrocket.
It's hard to say. I mean, the data just isn't very good on this stuff. I think one stat
I'm going to go with my data then.
Okay, well, my data that I read, I did see one interesting thing, and this is more of anecdata, right? It's more like it was more of an industry guy saying like, look, the bike industry it doesn't really have huge swings up and down. Yeah. Like it's not like some innovation happens and you just have a ton more people coming in. A lot of times people adopt a new bike at the expense of stopping using an older bike. Oh, okay. So you have people who are buying these e-bikes. Yeah, there might be some that are buying bikes for the first time, but they're probably former bikers who are already part of the biking community. So my guess is that's probably what we'll see. Will we see more tourists coming in that can more easily do some of the green routes in the lower Phil's area?
For sure.
I mean, sure.
You can see them on Galveston.
But I mean, it's hard to like, you see a lot of them on the 4th of July weekend, right? So is that number of riders you've seen now going to increase because they're on an e-bike? Yeah. It's hard to say. I mean, I think everybody is sort of experiencing this at the same time as we go. We've asked our trail leaders, crew leaders, our staff, like, how do you think this would impact the trails? And I think in general, it was hard for them to know, but one, they thought that a couple of circuits, a couple of paths would be used more often. So for example, the Whoops Trail, super fun, flowy downhill trail. And there's two climbing. There's a dirt road, a forest road that takes you up, and as well as pine drops. You can climb up the trail, pine drops to get up there. If I owned an e-bike, and I would
did 2
go
laps.
up and down
Right.
four times, right?
Right.
If now on my Nani bike, two's enough. I'm good.
Right.
Right. But if I would go and like make it a day and ride it 4 times,
Right.
probably going up the dirt road.
Right.
So it just enables something you couldn't have done before.
Right.
And so will we see more usage on particular trails because of that? Maybe.
I just feel like right now we're in a stage where people may have tried an e-bike, they like it, but that industry is just going to explode, and that usage and people's comfort level with them are going to go up, and you're going to see just a whole nother generation of people that are, some of it right now, yes, it's I think it's point of the spear. Like the person I was out with was in his 60s now, used to mountain bike, can't do what he did, doing just what you said, doing the things that he loves to do with a friend that he otherwise couldn't do. But that wave, I think, is right behind him of folks who are like, hey, what is this? Oh, this
Yeah.
is my first bike, and I
Yeah.
love it. It flies.
Well, and also, I mean, you just say like e-bikes. I think I've seen tons more e-bikes in Bend. People getting a decently capable kind of cargo-ish kind of
Right.
e-bike and doing grocery runs now, right?
Right.
So like your every couple of day grocery run can be done on an e-bike.
Oh, I
you
love
get
that.
a little exercise.
Right.
You're not dripping with sweat, and it's so I think the fact that e-bikes exist are enabling more of those use cases, commuters, kids going to school. So like, I think what's hard sometimes is you look at that wave and you think, oh man, is that coming for our trails? And I think it's still,
That's what I think.
I think, well, I don't know. It's hard to say. My hunch is that you look at the wave of e-bike growth. I think a smaller wave comes into the trails at the expense of maybe the same riders riding an e-bike now, whereas several years ago they weren't riding an e-bike because now they need one or something.
Right.
So it's just really hard to say, and we'll see as it evolves. But I think, bringing it back to COTA, because I'm all about COTA. I mean, part of the value of COTA as a trail organization is having the organization be available
Right.
to care for our trails. So should these things come up, I think that we're going to be, nimble and agile enough to handle these kinds of things.
Okay.
And we welcome the Class 1 e-bike riding community in, and they can become members, and love to see them out there doing trail work as well. And, so we'll see what happens.
What's next on the horizon for you guys? Like, do you have any projects that are of specific note?
Few things. There's some new trails being built, one near Redmond. There's a handful of improvements in different areas. It's what's incredibly rare are brand new trails, especially on the Forest Service.
Right.
Just like these e-bike rules take a long time to go through and sort of analyze, brand new trails as well. So there's a whole package of trails we've been asking about for a long time. I think it's just sort of like a massive quality of life improvement package for the West Bend network. A couple examples. So Pine Drops, for example, would be extended. So you can take Pine Drops, you climb up Pine Drops, and you're at the top of Lower Whoops. And if you want to go to Upper Whoops, you're on a dirt road, you're on a forest road. Well, there'll be an extension to Pine Drops that would continue to go all the way up to the top of Upper Whoops, brand new trail. There's a connector. This is like, there's a few, trails that are 50 yards that would connect, I think it is like Phil's to Voodoo. And so instead of dumping you onto a road, there'll be a little extension of a trail.
Great.
There's a couple improvements coming to the winter fat biking network. So it's just like all this stuff we've been asking about for a long time.
Yeah.
They sort of made this omnibus bill at the Forest Service.
Yeah.
And that was there was a public discussion on that a few months ago. So hopefully that's approved. Downhill trails at Winoga now coming. So a bunch of really fun, brand new things that are going to be coming in the next few years. And so that's what's going to fill our plate beyond all the maintenance and stuff like that too.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of at the end of our time here. Anything that you want to bring up that we haven't talked about, or anything you want people to know about?
I mean, I would love to make a shameless plug for
Hey,
COTA.
Shane,
So-
that's what this space is for.
Good. Well, I mean, like I said, COTA, our lifeblood is volunteers. Our
Yeah.
lifeblood is members. So, if anybody feels strongly about our trails and seeing them persist for generations, part of our vision is trails that endure for generations.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so like that comes on the back of people who become members and or become donors, or businesses who want to contribute to COTA in certain ways. But we have really fun kind of big trail work events called Trail Love, where we'll just go and like get 100 people and go, fix a trail.
Oh, great.
We also do really consistent like weeknight things, weekend things. So would really encourage listeners to get involved in. We've got certain subgroups like Women of COTA that are all about getting women on trails, building and maintaining the trails as well. So we'd love to have more listeners come and become COTA members and do trail work.
I've done some trail maintenance over the years for COTA, and it's not as you don't have to be the muscle bound.
There is one problem I'll point out though.
Yeah.
So once you clear a drain, did you clear a drain when you were?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're never gonna ride the trails the same because now when you're riding, you're like, oh my gosh, that drain
Right.
is all clogged up. We need to
Right.
we need to get out there and fix
there.
that.
Right,
you know,
right,
or
right.
the first time you
Yeah.
lop something, you're gonna get hit.
Yeah.
You know, like I rode the Mrazek Trail not too long ago,
Yeah.
and I was constantly getting hit by Manzanita.
Yeah.
I'm like, only if I had a pair of loppers, I could take care of this problem right now. So
My thing is, I always, when I'm coming into a curve, and I'm like, don't brake, don't cause this, don't ruin
Yeah, I
the
know,
track, and
exactly.
you're just like, I gotta brake.
yeah, exactly.
So, website, places where they can contact you.
COTA MTB, COTA MTB.com. You can also Google search for us. You'll find us that way too.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time today.
Of course.
And yeah, if you are enjoying the trails out there, at least spend a little time taking care of them.
We love that.
This has been the Bend Don't Break podcast. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to the Bend Don't Break podcast, powered by The Source Weekly. To read, hear, and see more of what we do, go to bendsource.com.